Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. It's going to be a great show today. I'm really interested in my guest, and it's something relevant, and it's something that's been in the news lately, so hang around for that. If you haven't done so, go check out Behind the Wall. That's the newest thing with the Prison Officer Podcast. If you want to go deeper into these conversations, if you want to read more and see more about what goes on with the podcast, that's a great place to start. You can check it out in the notes. While we're here, I'd also like to thank Pepperball. They've been my sponsor for 4.5 years now, and I appreciate them. Without them, this podcast would not be possible. And while you're thinking of it, while you're right there, go ahead and hit subscribe and give us a like. And I really appreciate that. That's how we drive views to this podcast, and that's how we get to stay on the air. So let me introduce Captain Tevin Dixon. He is a dedicated correctional professional with over a decade of service in the Oklahoma Department of Corrections. He has built a reputation for strong leadership, integrity, and a commitment to public safety. Raised in Oklahoma City by a single mother, Captain Dixon credits much of his foundation to the strength of his family and the support of his extended village, which played a vital role in his upbringing and development. These early influences helped shape the values of discipline, accountability, and perseverance. He is a proud graduate of Midwest City High School. Began his career with ODOC as a frontline capacity correctional officer. Captain Dixon quickly demonstrated a natural ability to lead and manage complex situations within the correctional environment. During his tenure, he also served as a case manager for 3 years, where he played a critical role in offender management. He's currently serving as a captain at Allen Gamble Correctional Center. Captain Dixon oversees daily operations, supervises staff, and ensures adherence to the departmental policies and procedures. As an African-American leader in corrections, Captain Dixon brings perspective, resilience, and a strong sense of purpose to this role. He's committed to mentoring others, promoting fairness, and upholding the highest standards of service within the department. And I am very happy to have him on here. Welcome, Tevin.
Hello. Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. I am excited to have you on here. I want to learn more about you. I want to know how you got started. I say that you grew up in Oklahoma City. We're not too far away from each other. I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, so we're just a few hours apart. But Tell me, what was growing up like in Oklahoma City?
I started out, my mother grew up in basically she's the 13th she's the 12th out of 13 children. And so They all had actually moved to the city. And basically we went from the eastern side of schools, and then we went to, I ended up graduating from Midwest City High School. And shortly after, I ended up going to Miami, Oklahoma, to northeastern Oklahoma for about a semester and a half, and ended up moving back home and started back working and stuff. And basically throughout all my years, I always wanted to be something in law enforcement. But basically while I was there at NEO, my first thing I wanted to be was basically a crime scene investigator.
Yeah.
And the professor showed some pictures where he wouldn't. I couldn't go to sleep at night after looking at some of those pictures and stuff like that. And so that's why I ended up going down the correctional field after I came back from college. I ended up working a couple odds and end jobs, and shortly after I ended up moving back down to Boley, Oklahoma. My grandfather was in transition of passing away, and all my family's from the country, started from. So that's how I ended up from the city back to the country. And I've been down in Boley. I started out at John Lilly Correctional Facility in 2015. I ended up working.
Did you know somebody that had worked in corrections? How'd you get into the job? Where'd you find the job?
My grandmother, when Boley at John Lilly, it actually started as basically a home for Negro boys, and I knew it was down here, but I didn't ever didn't ever think about being a correctional officer.
Yeah.
And when I moved down here, I was helping my uncle, remodel and paint houses. One of the correctional officers, she saw me and she said, "You need to come out to the prison." And shortly after, I ended up, I put in my application and came out there and didn't ever look back. Ended up while I was working corrections and got back in school. Got my degree in criminal justice, just an
Nice.
associate. And so that's why I was going back and forth in case management as well. And I got that taken care of. Basically, I TDY'd at several different other facilities while working at John Lilly.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So I have different levels of security levels. Ended up working at North Fork in Sarah, Oklahoma. Dick Connors, Naval Bassett for a little bit, and now actually I switched over to Allen Gamble probably about a year and a half.
Okay. What level security is that joint?
It was medium max, but they just recently switched over. The max is all over the OSP.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So, first time you walked in, had you ever been in jail before? Had you ever been in prison before?
No. That was my first time. I was 24 years old and I didn't know nothing.
What was that like?
Right. Basically, I basically felt like a kid because I never been around. I have a few maybe older cousins that's in law enforcement, but I never been around law enforcement. I was nervous. I had I was at several different incidences that I done went through and stuff like that. When I first started, I always laugh and basically I always think about one of my coworkers. She still work at John Lilly, Becky Smith. She basically took me under her wing, and we all call her mother hen. And so that she mentored, somebody else always takes somebody to mentor, and like her and several other officers help mentor us along the way. So why I'm laughing because it always comes with stories working in corrections, so that's why I got like a little smirk on there. So starting out that, and then my training officer basically he done it for 20 years, and he told me the ropes and basically just said basically go, this is what you do, treat them with respect, and they'll give you respect back, and you shouldn't have any issues from there. And that at John Lilly, that's the minimum. So the inmates are everywhere, so it's not like behind a door. So you actually learn how to deal with people more at like a community corrections and a minimum, and then helping us going to different facilities. That's what gained my experiences and my you know what I mean, and basically gaining all my correctional experiences, going to different levels of security and being on like CERT. Basically, that's like a correctional emergency response team. And that's just helped me out throughout my years, just dealing with the different levels of from security starting out and been around the years and
Absolutely. Yeah, I tell when young officers ask me, hey, what should I be doing? I always tell them to get on a team, because being on a team does a couple of things. One, you get that mentorship from the other people. Plus, you've got people who are holding you to a standard, and they're keeping you in line. So, yeah, I think being on a CERT team is a wonderful part of anybody's career. So,
yes, sir.
Yeah, that's So, how long have you been captain?
Just about a year and a half now. May, I do believe that's the half mark here in May. So just about a year and a half, yes, sir.
So in Oklahoma, is captain a shift supervisor, or is it the chief of custody? Where does the
shift supervisor?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you're running day watch, evening watch?
Day watch 0600 to 1800.
Oh, you guys are on 12.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay.
We're on 512. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of places are having to adjust schedules because of staffing. Yeah, and that's probably why they did that there.
Yes, sir.
So tell me a little bit about, I know that you said you grew up and your mom was a single mom, and that you were raised by, you said, a village. That's kind of the term that we use. Tell me about that. How did those people around you build up some of those characteristics that you use today?
Basically, my grandfather, when he passed in 2015, he was 93 years old. So basically, like I'm only 35 years old, but I grew up with the older generation. I grew up around his aunts and uncles. Like history, I know history firsthand. So um, I basically we had to work. Even though I was young, everything wasn't just given to me. Even though when we come down to Bowley or come down, uh, what I mean, to Grandpa's house, we always would have to work. So we always had chores. If it was in the wintertime, we had to go get firewood. Well, Grandpa always had some type of job, and he always said, "Just keep working, and everything will pay off." That's basically what I live by. And basically, my mom, she's the 12th out of 13. She has six other sisters, and basically 6 sisters and 7 boys. And
Wow.
so basically, like all the sisters are very close. Like, even though when we stayed in the city, it was 3 sisters stayed on one street. And so basically, like if you got in trouble,
You
somebody gonna
couldn't get
get
away
on
with
to you.
nothing.
You can't get away with nothing. That's where I say a village family. Somebody gonna
Yeah.
thump you. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
not say, whoop your tail or something like that, but somebody gonna give you some discipline.
Yep.
And then they gonna go tell your mom and dad, and and go from there. And so
Yep.
so basically that's where it comes from. When like I say a village town with my family.
Yeah.
Uh, Even when I grew up in Millwood City, when we moved to Millwood City, it was everybody. Like everybody kind of still looked out for each other. My aunt, my older aunt, she still stayed like a couple blocks down from the way, and then one of my other uncles ended up staying in Millwood City too. So even though we stayed in Millwood City, we were still coordinated with family around. We was all still like, family oriented, and we'll end up coming down to Bowley and go fishing as a family, have big family reunions, and basically that's how. If you got in trouble, and I always remember this with my Aunt Lulu. If you got in trouble, if you got suspended from your school, you was going to school with Aunt Lulu. And going to school with Aunt Lulu was way worse than your regular school. So you might as well just be good, stay out of trouble, and
Yeah.
just don't just fly straight, pretty much. And so that's why I say, like, a village family with my family, and like
Yeah.
basically, and all my uncles, when we come down here, they always say, you know, you get in the front, you get in the front of this truck, because I'm not going to listen to Cat. That's my mom. And they say, watch out for Tevin, because we don't have time listening to Cat's mouth or something like that. So it was like pretty much they'll get on to me, but it was in a different way. So they know they'll get in, you know how brothers and sisters are. So they always kept me out in line. They always kept me out of trouble. So everybody always, is just like basically a big disciplinary family oriented.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up the same way. I mean, neighbors could give you a spanking when I was little, and then they'd drag your ass home,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
you were going to get a second one. But yeah, I think we need some more of that. There's nothing wrong with that. That everybody's watching.
Right, everybody watching. Right,
Yeah.
I remember that in church. I got popped like that in church one time. So yeah, church was the worst. You better not show out in church. So
Yeah.
that's one of the big things why I say I grew up in a big village family. That'll help out a lot. That'll help out us on the correctional side too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I don't know
yeah.
about you, but I needed that many people watching me.
Me, me too. Same here.
Yeah. So, yeah, tell me a little bit about Oklahoma Department of Corrections. I mean, you've been working for them for over a decade now. I don't hear a lot out of Oklahoma, except I had Dan Reynolds on here several podcasts ago, and he was a warden and was at the riot. Which one? Oh, I forgot which one it is. I should have looked that up before we came on air. But
Right,
he told me he was in one of the big riots. I think it was OSP
right.
when they had a big riot back in the 70s or 80s. But
Yeah.
what's some of the things you guys are doing there? What's new in Oklahoma?
Basically, This year, like usually every facility it got its own little community, like culture. But this year,
Hmm.
across the Oklahoma Department of Corrections, they basically did like a inmate games. They can't really say Olympics because it's the trademark. So they basically got all the inmates competing to basically go to another facility and compete against each other, and every inmate got like certain inmates to represent each other. So that's pretty neat on our part. And
That's cool.
all the inmates are, they made shirts for them, and they all like, they got the inmate shirts, and they got staff shirts, and they got the Olympic game. I mean, not Olympic games. They say inmate games on there, and it's pretty neat because like the staff is crunk. They're making, snow cones. They're running around. They actually give them something to do instead of just sitting in the cells and stuff. Um,
Sure.
the programs on top of that, the programs are getting a lot better within the corrections from when I first started. They actually have a really good um, team with I think it's called God Behind Bars. So like
Okay.
they've been providing a lot of like funding and stuff where we didn't have none. Like basically like entertainment systems. Basically bringing different like basically I grew up old school. I don't know, people really don't talk religion and stuff like that, but they bringing a lot of preaching back into the church. A lot of like bringing the pastors back in. They're bringing a lot of different religious
Yeah.
services. Not just for not just for Christianity, but it's just whatever. If anybody got something going on, they're bringing a lot of religions back within the corrections and stuff as well. I saw a big concert one weekend, and it was pretty. They had different parts where they all was singing and stuff, and
Yeah.
they all eating, and it was pretty nice. And I was a case manager as well, so I kind of always talk to the inmates about going to programs, and basically don't let your current situation be their only situation, because I have saw like
Right.
life, like life inmates, like what they call it, they're doing life,
Hmm.
get stepped down with parole step downs as well. So I always try to, talk to them about like different programs as well. If they have parole stipulations, I try to speak life into them, generally speaking, because basically certain inmates will have like a SAT, like a
Hmm.
substance abuse treatment, and I try to talk to them about different different facilities that have it, or try to give them the proper chain of command to talk to where they can, so they can get the different programmings for their parole stipulations and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's something I never did. I was security my whole career. So, as a case manager, did you feel like you were able to affect some change with those guys more so than you were with security? Or do you think you can do it from both jobs?
I feel like both ends. It just made me more rounded as a correction officer, because as starting in security, I didn't really understand policies. I didn't really understand how to look up policies. But when I went to case management, and I was actually working around people that been within the department 30 years, 40 years, and they're teaching me stuff. As the old folk, cool your heels, slow down,
Sure. Sure.
trust but verify. A lot of people don't really hear them terms anymore like that, and it actually built me even as a man. It helped me grow as a man
Hmm.
within the corrections, and as a father as well. So it just basically helped me grown as well. Different. Been around different people, different caseloads, different people that employees are working around them. I learned basically the paperwork side of corrections as well, and not just the security side. I learned like basically like all the different steps. Like basically, if I write up an inmate, I know where it goes from point A to point B all the way to the Z. Not just trying to, oh, I wrote you up or anything like that. So I try to handle it. Basically being a case manager, it helped me learn the department, learn the system, and it helped me more rounded. So basically, I'm more approachable, and I'm more understanding. I feel like I'm having like a more effect.
I understand that. More approachable. Yeah.
More approachable. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, sir. Yeah, yes, sir.
Sometimes in security, we don't, in corrections, we don't get very approachable. I was
Right.
also interested in something else in your bio. You mentioned, as an African American leader in corrections. So, do you get the chance to mentor younger black officers, and what do you teach them? Because you're talking about a lot of resilience, you're talking about a lot of mentorship. What is it that you stress with them when they come in to help them do this job?
Basically, I just tell them straight up, you do your job, watch yourself, read policy.
Mm-hmm.
If I see something, if I see something, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. You get more. You get more. I tell them straight up. You're gonna get more. You're gonna get a lot of crap from your own kind, not just the whites, the blacks, the Indians. You've been in corrections, so you understand what I'm saying. So I give them straight up heads up. Hey man, you gotta show up on time.
Right.
You can't be late all the time. If you're supposed to be, you're supposed to be here at this time, you need to be here because as a supervisor, I can't ask my other supervisors to the lieutenants and the sergeants, I can't ask them to supervise you if you're not here, not even on time, if you're not here at the facility. So that's my main thing. If I see that, and I just give them forewarning, and that's even like any correctional officer, you're gonna get crap from your own kind. So I try to give them that. That's my first. That's my first one. And then if they ask me, if the inmates are like doing something to them, like they don't understand, you're gonna have to meet in the middle with inmates. Some officers come in and they like, oh, I got the power, and they walk in there 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and they yelling count time. And I try to tell them, you got to meet in the middle because some of these inmates go to school, they go to class, they go to they go to work, they keep the facilities going. So I just try to tell them straight up, like, hey, meet in the middle, use your nonverbal communication as much as your verbal communication because it'll help you as well in every time. So I just try to tell them different ways how to handle different situations. If they ask me any questions, I try to be more approachable because when I first started corrections, I worked around officers that said, I'm not gonna learn their names. I'm not gonna speak to that officer basically because I don't know who they are. I was always, like I mentioned before, I was always brung in by several different officers with open arms. So I try to, you know what I mean. If they're doing the right thing, I try to bring them in, and even if they're not, I try to, try to help them out to see if this job is for them. And sometimes corrections is not for them. So, and if they don't want to be in security, I even try to tell them like it's different options. You can go be a case manager. You can go be, canteen worker. You can go work in the mailroom. You got your foot in the door with corrections now. I try to just, different options. It's not always cut and dry. You can always work different places, so.
Yeah, I've said many times, I don't know where I'd be if it wasn't for corrections because,
Right.
I never fit into a job really well until I found corrections. And when I started, I didn't really want to be in corrections. It was just a job for a little bit, but I started enjoying it. I started enjoying training. I love training staff. I was like you. I had great mentors. That's why I push that so hard these days, is for us to go back and mentor the others and bring them along with us because I had such great mentors when I started. So that's why I was interested about that. And you mentioned that, resilience and mentorship, and those are the things that, they help those new officers the most.
Yeah.
Teaching them about how to get through each day, not take it personally. So you kind of segued, and I want to move on to the next section of this. So the other day, it was on TV and it was on YouTube, and you had a guy show up, and I'm not going to give him the credit of putting his name out there because from what I read, he's scum. But you had a guy show up who's one of those First Amendment people, and he's going to show up and he's going to try to provoke people, and he's looking for, clicks and stuff on his YouTube channel. And he does this. He's a disbarred attorney. But he showed up at your correctional center talking bad to everybody, right? Tell me a little bit about how that started. You were there. Tell me a little bit about how it started, and then we'll get into the rest of it.
Well, I'm going to be honest. As a supervisor, the show must go on. It don't matter what could be thrown at you. The show must go on.
Right.
So I was actually running chow that day, and it'd been a long day, so I'm running chow, and the perimeter officer, he been there for a long time. He said, shift supervisor, it's 106. 106? I got somebody out here with camcorders, and I'm thinking he's just joking around because it's the end of the day. I'm like, ain't no way, whatever. I was just telling him, to go on, basically. And then he basically we got these radios we can private line, and so um, when I first private lined him, that's what he told me, and I told him, just tell him to go on. And then as on the next time he came back and he said, "Well, they told me it's none of my business why I'm here. Just basically keep doing your job." And I'm like, "Now hold on, wait a minute." So I, as a supervisor, I was like, "Hey, y'all got the chow hall. I delegated it. Y'all got food service. Y'all got this right now. Go ahead and, keep running chow. I'm going to go address this situation." And once he said that, all the other staff was alerted that, like, the deputy wardens and the chief, like, both deputy wardens was there and the chief of security was there. And basically, some of the other staff was still in the process of leaving because it was Friday, basically the Friday before Easter. And so when we get, and we had an inmate in the hospital, so we're trying to get out of there.
One of those
And
shifts. Yep.
yeah. Like everything was going on. And so we walk into gate one, which is like the main entrance, and one of the older officers was leaving, heading out. So that's how he got into the gate, like basically not into he got into the Sally Port, the first gate, the outer gate one.
So they
And
popped him in thinking he was staff because there was so much movement there.
Yes, sir. And
Okay.
they thought they seen one officer heading to the hospital, so they was letting him out, and so they didn't know what was going. You know how it is at a facility. You got 1,700 inmates, X amount of staff. So you sitting there going around left and right. And so we get to me, the chief of security, Chief Lumley, and both deputy wardens, Deputy Johnson and Henry Underwood. We get out there to the gate. And so I asked my supervisor, Chief Lumley, I said, "Hey, do you think I look down, you're like, we can talk in non-code. And, verbal and non-verbal." So, I looked at him, I gave him that look. I'm like, you want me to? And he like, "Yeah, go ahead." So the body cam rolled back that minute, where in body cams, it rolls back a minute once you double tap and once you activate it. And so once it rolled, that's why I caught the other time before that. And so we all walking out, and then along came Lieutenant Odom as well. So we get out the facility, and he was asking that, the guy that was talking crazy, we ain't gonna, I'm like, you're not even gonna discuss his name.
Right.
He was just trying to get anything from any officer, So he had the perimeter there, and he was trying to question him, and the perimeter officer was like, "There's my chief of security. You can talk to the chief of security. He's right there." And so he's going on and on and on. So then he's approaching me because everybody kind of, dispersed out. And the chief was like, "Well, you can submit your records for the open rack, the open act, and you can go through our legal department." And so he didn't want to hear that. He was like, "Tell us about a false number of deaths." And it wasn't even correct. It wasn't even correct. And so we're trying to tell him, like, go through legal.
Let me ask real quick. So do you guys have signs posted? No videotaping, no cameras because of the security aspect of it?
I know it's one at the entrance.
Okay.
Don't quote me on the wordage of it. But I know it's I know it say the search and seizure, the search and seizure one, like anybody that's on premises. And I know we have a trespassing sign, but I don't think it's now we do for sure. Now it's now it's out there for sure. But that at Allen Gamble, that the state basically just took it over 2.5 years ago. So it's basically we basically renting it from Core Civic. So basically it's a Core Civic facility, but DOC's runs it right now, but it's still owned by Core Civic. Okay. So we still have, certain things we have to, talk to them about and make sure. So I know it's one down there, but don't put me on the wordage.
That's okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if he had come past those signs. So there are signs out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's not there on official business, he's trespassing. Right. So
he's trespassing, right?
Yeah. Go ahead. I didn't mean to stop you. I just had those questions.
No, you're good. And so, that basically just started a whole deal because the chief, it was the end of the day. Wasn't nobody expecting that, all that stuff to happen. So
right.
we was just there as, support, and, we was just sitting there talking, and we was just basically telling them, like, hey, you need to leave. You can be, at first, it was a little different communication, so it was a little communication issue. And so at first we told them, like, you can be in the parking lot. But now we know for sure is, we all then verified it through each other for sure is the road. You can record at the road, but you cannot record, coming to the parking lot. You can't harass CTU because once I went in, the guy stayed there. We had Central Transport come in. He was over there recording them and harassing them. So it was probably a whole another 5 more minutes that, should have been recorded and put out there too. But
well, see, the thing that worries me is if he's a different kind of bad actor, but if you had a bad actor out there trying to do surveillance on how we move inmates in and out during a medical trip, or our security procedures, if he was that type of person. So that's why I would be really nervous about having somebody up there videotaping, in case they were going to use that for maybe an outside assault or something. Of course, I've had years of this ingrained in my head, so I'm always thinking worst case scenario. But
hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Right. Yeah. So, I saw that. I'll put a link in this. I'll put a link to that video in our notes here. The other thing that I saw was and I wrote this in an article for Corrections One. One of the things I saw was one of the greatest displays of professionalism I've ever seen, and that was you, and that's why I asked you to come on this podcast. It's one thing, and all of us have been through it in all different ways on the inside. Inmates say stuff to us that is horrible, that is, they're trying to get to you. They'll say stuff about your family, your ethnicity, everything like that, just trying to get that rise out of you. But I don't think I don't, at that level, especially the level, and you can go into it or you can not, what he said, it was disgusting. But I don't think I ever heard anything from that level from the public, from outside the fence.
Right.
So that had to have just kind of been a shock,
It was.
Why is this happening on the outside?
Right.
Can you tell me what you were thinking right then?
The more I've been going through it, is like, I was really shocked, and I'm thank God, in the video you see the chief, tell me like Dixon, go, and I thank God I actually went off because you don't know you never know what's which, and I thank God, older me, 35-year-old me, thank God, mature me was there, and it wasn't young me, because I wasn't thinking, that ain't never happened to me, but never in my life like that, and I know, like, you grow up and people joke around, you play around and stuff like that, but never nothing like that to that intense, and like, my family, like I said, my family's from Boley, which is a predominantly black town, back in the older days. And so history is ingrained in me, from school, from with my family, and my family's so mixed up. So I know, all type of history. So it was just shocking, you know what I mean? I wasn't expecting it. That's why I was like, and then I thank God my chief was like Dixon, go, because I was like, oh, I gotta go before for the wrong switch click off, and that's why I went on ahead and went in there, and that's why I kind of waited on the other you know how it is working in corrections. We all got our trauma buddies, we all got our little buddies, we all linked up with, and so that's why I looked at Odom. I looked at that one that came through the gate last, like, come on. Get in here. We ain't gonna do this today because we don't come to work to be the bad guys. We get labeled the bad guys just for our uniforms every day.
Yeah.
And that's what helped me as a correctional officer. That's what when I went to case management, that's when I learned about the uniforms. You know what I mean? They're not cussing us; they cussing the uniforms, and it was just crazy. You know what I mean? When all that happened, so. I don't mean to just ramble on like that, but God, you know what I mean? It was just really shocking, when it all happened like that. That's why I was like, what just really happened? And, the next day, I didn't go to work, and you know what I mean? Like, just really just when I was rewatching the body cam, and I was just thinking, I was like, this really just happened. What? Like, come on, man. Like, it's 2026. Why we got to be,
Yeah. Other than the fact that this guy's a piece of crap, and he was hoping beyond hoping that was going to make you snap. That's all he wanted. And then, of course, it would have been his camera on YouTube, whatever. But I have to give props to the Oklahoma Department of Corrections, too, because they released that video as is so that everybody can see what he was doing and how that played out. Because we don't often do that. We're very poor. And I'm not talking about Oklahoma specifically, but as a profession, when things happen, we tend to hide it. We tend to be quiet and we don't put it out there. And that was one of those times that, they were transparent. And that's so important, because if they wouldn't have been transparent, he would have done all kinds of stuff, even more so on his own channel or on his own whatever, tweets or whatever, that said all these bad things, and nobody would have known. They'd just thought, oh, it's another correctional officer being bad, because that's all they see.
Yep. And you're totally right. Yep. And that's why when when it first happened and they didn't know it was that bad, they didn't know it was that level until my chief was mad. Some of my friends within corrections was mad, and they got a hold of the director, and they're like, we need to watch this. This is what happened, and he watched it. And once he watched it, he made contact with me, and he like, are you good? So then they made contact with legal, so it was just going back and forth. And I was like, I'm good with it. And they was like, do you want to be blurred out of it? I was like, no. This is what needs to be said. This is what need to show the truth out there, what people go through. I was always taught, if you want to, if you actually want something to change and you want something to, you got to be the change.
Absolutely.
That's what, you know what I mean? That's why I stay within corrections, because I feel like, I'm making a change. I'm doing my part in community, trying to, get people, back to society, with a good foundation. Like, prison prison ain't got to be hard, but, if you go this route and you show out, it can be hard, so I just,
Yeah, absolutely. And applaud Oklahoma Department of Corrections again. Not only did the director get involved in that, but I think you got a little honor after that, didn't you, about how well you handled yourself?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Tell me about that.
Yes, sir. This past Wednesday, I got a governor's convention. I went with the director, I went with the chief of operations and the area manager. I met a lot of people. I didn't know the director of politics so much, and I met a lot of amazing people that I probably would have never met if this wouldn't happen. I really seen how, not saying like down to earth, but I really seen like, we're all just human beings and we're just trying to make it day in through day out, and so it was an honor to meet the governor, off top, it was an honor to be with the director. You see these different people, behind the scenes on TV, on the internet, but actually walking with them and actually talking with them, and, like it was a truly honor, you know what I mean? That it sucks that it actually happened like this, but it was just an honor, like, you know what I mean? Like that's what they was like. Golly, like, you know what I mean? We was all just happy, you know what I mean? The chief security, the deputy wardens, the area manager, the director, like, I know the director of corrections see him, more than we do, but, not nothing to be recognized for somebody like, doing their job, going above and beyond, it was so many different variables that could have went wrong for us, for the whole agency. And then it would have been a whole nother, bad thing again, and then missed deal on the correction. So, like,
Well, and I teach a lot of classes, and one of the things that we always talk about is learning to respond instead of react. And sometimes for young officers, and I was one of them, that's hard to do. Any tips there? What was your? Do you remember the decision that you made to go take a breath? It's probably what you did. Take a breath, and then.
Yes, sir. I did take a breath. To be honest, when I became a lieutenant, I went from running the yard, you know what I mean, just straight contraband hound. I got to get this, I got to get everything, to actually having to manage my people. And when I was the case manager, that's my unit manager told me. He told me, like, your hardest deal is going to be you're managing employees. And I'm like, man, no way. I can manage 100 and something inmates like that. You know, there's nothing. And he was like, well, you just wait till you get to those employees. And so I actually had to go to training. I went to some leadership training because I wanted to be an effective leader. You know, I didn't want to just be in a spot, you know, ha ha ha, I got this promotion and that's it. You know, like so I went through basically like a year and a half worth of like leadership training. I went through the Department of Corrections offers extreme ownership training.
Yep. Great book.
100X. Yeah, great book.
Everybody should read that book.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I went through the basically it's a year-long program they got now within the department. It's the 100X program, like the 100X leadership book, and and basically you got it's basically like a group discussion, and you go in there and it's basically you think you're not gonna learn nothing, but it's kind of like church. You know, you learn something about yourself, you learn something about, like, you know, you take back, and it's just basically like it takes back, and it's a ripple effect, because now since I'm over at Allen Gamble, I'll use all this training when I was over there, you know, at John Lilly, and it's just to help me, you know, promote and keep people and effectively talk to people, like, you know. And being a supervisor, you know, we got to sometimes take that face and just like, the show must go on. But at the end of the day, some people may need that pat on the back, or that data boy, or hey, I got some training for you to go to, you know, you know what I mean, to go to it. And it may actually help people, because it may actually help you, you know, within the department and out of the department, you know. And so
Absolutely.
sometimes it's good, and especially really good, because as a young officer, ooh, like, I can be honest with you, because you know you've been a CO, so I can be honest. You know, as a young officer, you know, you didn't got into it those couple times with different people where you're looking back like, man, I thank God I didn't get in trouble way worse than what I did, because we could have been, because you know it comes to blows, and I just thank God, like, you know what I mean. Like, I tell them, like, don't, you know what I mean, think before you react, you know, take a breath, you know, trust, you know, take a walk. And even as a supervisor, you know, I still had some of my sergeants and, you know, our battle buddies, you know, somebody see me, we having a bad day, they're like, hey, go take a walk. Go to your office, you know, go take you 5 minutes, go eat you something. You know, are you hungry? You know what I mean? And so that's like different little stuff, you know. I'm glad I done went through, went through different things, and somebody, you know, checks and balances us, as well as I can always be there for my, like, you know what I mean, my other support, my subordinates, as well as, like, you know what I mean, my peers, because, you know what I mean, you know, we always hear that it ain't no crying in prison. Ain't no, like, you know what I mean? And so sometimes, you know what I mean, sometimes you may have to check in with somebody to make sure they okay before, you know what I mean, they're not going out there on the floor an emotional wreck. So, you know what I mean, we didn't went through a lot of stuff, you know what I mean? That's like losing officers, training, just being mature, you know what I mean? So that's pretty much the tips I really got to people, you know. Go talk to somebody.
Yeah, I think and you and I have a lot in common, because we both chased leadership knowledge. But I think that's a perfect example of, you didn't just come up at the moment with, I'm going to be this way, or I'm going to do this. This was a path for you. You had been through a lot of leadership training. You had thought about all this stuff, so that when the moment came, and that's what training's all about, right? Is preparing for that moment, whatever it is. You know, yours was this for now. It'll be something different next time. But that's what training is: getting ahead of it, having some skills, having some knowledge, so that you can make those right decisions when the time comes. And I think you're a perfect example of that. Great job.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, because, like, you know, going through different stuff, and sometimes, you know, you take those little mental notes and put a little sticky note on the wall. You may see something, and my grandpa used to always say is, just keep working. You know, it'll be all right. Just keep working. You know, it'll be all right. And sometimes I got to take the little note and stick it up there and remind myself, like, you know, it's gonna be okay. You know, it's okay to have a bad day. You know, but don't go messing up somebody else's day because you having a bad day. You know, and so, like, You know what I mean? You know how it is in corrections, Sometimes you gotta go eat crow. Sometimes you gotta, hey, this is my path, I'm gonna down this hill. So
I listened to my father many times. My father used to tell me when I say I don't like doing this or I don't want to do this. He'd say sometimes sometimes we have to do things we don't want to, and you might as well go do it well. And there was many days in corrections that I thought, okay, I got to do this anyway, so I might as well do it well. And
might as well do it with, right?
we learn from our family, don't we?
Yep, yes, sir. That's what some of the young officers be like. I always like when you get on a tangent and then you say something country. Like I always tell them, I said, well, some of y'all work harder. Y'all work harder to get out of work than just doing the work ahead. And they always laugh. And I'm a frontline supervisor. I'm not a sitting on my tail supervisor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I get more buy-in. I get more feedback. I ask them what's going on. It's not always my way or the highway with my, with my team. And it always sucks when you build good teams and they promote. You know what I mean? That's the greatest that's the greatest, accomplishment and the greatest deal that you can receive when your team's starting to promote out and go into different, the fields and stuff within the agency. But it's like, golly, dang, you was a good one. Like, you know what I mean? Dang, you was a good one. You know what I mean? But that's what, you know what I mean? Like my role, like I was talking to some of my cousins and my brothers and stuff yesterday, and I was telling them, I was like, it's crazy how how my career is starting to change. You know what I mean? I'm the go-to person. You know what I mean? Like people from different facilities. They'll come to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like I haven't talked to some of the people for 2-3 years, and they coming to me, and I'm like, well, this is what you do. This, and this, and I'm like, well, I didn't know. I guess I'm the old guy now. Like, you know what I mean? After 10 years, I'm the old guy.
Yeah.
So it's just coming with territory now.
Let me ask you one last question. What you did and the way you handled it wasn't just a pat on your back. It was a pat on corrections back. I was proud to be part of corrections. I was proud to see you get that from the governor, And what do you wish the public knew about our job? About what we see, what we do, what we go through. What is it that, because they don't get a good picture. What do you wish, if you could give them a picture, what would it be?
They don't understand, basically, and I'm not trying to, when I say this, I'm not no Trump on no other like military, no other first responder, nobody say this. But I wish I could tell the public, I wish I could tell everybody, in corrections, we go through way more trauma than any military. We're in our combat zone day in and day out. Now, it's not like that at every facility, but at the end of the day, somebody may die, somebody may OD. I may have to tell somebody to call home, call home. It may be something serious. I don't know what's going on, but your family's calling for you. And then I may have to go deal with somebody that's like, a staff member, and I got to go tell them, you know what I mean, something is going on with their family, or I got to send the officer out in the ambulance. And, we don't never know what may go on within our circus. So, like, I feel like the public, I feel like we always get labeled as the bad guys. We always get labeled as the people that's put their people behind the bars or not giving them no help and are not like, but at the end of the day, we're not, we go through so much trauma. We go through so much stuff day in and day out, and we still right back in the trauma zone, especially like the earlier, 80s and the 90 corrections and early 2000 corrections. Prison was prison, it was bad. And for example, Allen Gamble is not labeled, it's not always labeled as the greatest prison. And they don't see the good and the bad. They always just see we are always in the wrong. It's not, you know what I mean? It's a lot of stuff that goes on, and you know what I mean? They was like, well, we wish we had more staff, or you know what I mean? It's your fault that they got the knives, and it's your fault they doing this. And I'm like, well, it ain't our fault. We just trying to keep people out the prisons, You know how it is working in prisons. We're trying to keep the public out of the prisons, we're not giving them the knives. We're not giving them all this stuff like that. And so I just wish the public would see, like, we're not, you know what I mean? When we have a death inmate, an inmate dealing with it, we still hold that stuff on, even as officers. We still deal with stuff amongst us. It's not always just like, cut and dry cookie couple. You know what I mean? We still got a lot of trauma too on our end. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
as well too, when we dealing with stuff as well, working within the corrections. So that's why I said we go through a lot of we go through a lot of trauma, a lot of combat, and we don't get to go 6 months off or 2 years off. We're right back in the trauma day in and day out. We got a death here. We got an OD here. We got a stabbing over here. And we still, day in and day out.
Yep.
We got to come back to work. You know what I mean? So
I
I
do.
just, check on your people. You know what I mean? Pretty much. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's one of the main things. And I love your concept of battle buddy. Have that person you can go talk to, have that person you can go vent to, and then let them vent to you. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you said the public doesn't get to see the good and the bad. They just see the bad. And I will tell you, and I will thank you for being the person that showed them the good. And thank Oklahoma Department of Corrections for going ahead and sharing that, as tough as it was. And I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Man, thank you, Mike, for having me.
It's great to hear your story, and I hope we get to meet sometime in person.
Yes, sir. Look, yes, sir. Yeah, I'll be glad to come meet you, man. I appreciate you having me, and it's a truly honor. And my aunt saw your article. She's basically NAACP president, and she applauded you so much, and she thanked that it's not just a incident that's just basically getting swept under the rug.
Yeah.
So she was happy about your article. She saw it, and so she commented on it. She called me. We talked about it as well. So thank you. I appreciate it.
It's great to hear. That's very cool. Yeah. Thank you, Tevin.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And we'll talk again someday.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Stay on here. Don't click off.
Okay.
I'm going to hit stop. If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.